Hey everyone, it's Nancy, the nurse practitioner here from Caregiver Success. Hope you're having a great evening and happy Mother's Day to all you moms out there and grandmas and all of you gals. I just want to introduce to you Susan Edith Marks, who's a nurse practitioner, and she works with cannabis. She is a consultant, has her own company. I will say that I have many friends who have said, "Oh, I'm not going to take marijuana for anything," that are
Mhm.
older. It just happened in my family. So we're going to help everybody kind of understand really the difference between, smoking weed, let's say, or pot, or taking medical marijuana in the form of cannabis. And this is why we need Susan today, because she's going to break this down. And just something I want to say is that everything we develop through life and through pharmaceuticals comes from many of them from plants. And this is one of them, just like digitalis and other such drugs that have been around for centuries, or a long time. So let's keep that in perspective as we go through understanding more about how cannabis and the um, cannabinoids, 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 how the cannabinoids are broken down and work. So tell us more about yourself, Susan. I know I just a crazy
People trip
introduction.
up over that word all the time. I
Yeah,
hear cannabinoids,
cannabinoid.
cannabinoids.
Yeah, oh my gosh, I was gonna say carrots. Well, there's no R's in the, okay. But anyway, so tell us more about, first of all, your story, how you got into this field, and what happened to you that led you here.
Yeah, it's funny when you started by saying a lot of people have kind of a closed mind towards cannabis. I was one of them.
Sure.
I knew cannabis was used by cancer patients and it was effective as an anti-nausea agent and it helped relieve pain and a few other things. But it wasn't until I needed to find a solution to my own health issue. I have a progressive neurological movement disorder, and I was on primidone, an anticonvulsant, and that's the typical treatment. It's called essential tremors. They will give you anti-seizure drugs and beta blockers to help manage the movements. And so when I got to the point where my movements were, so bad that I needed medication, when they put me on the primidone, it was just a horrible experience. Yeah, those are very, very heavy duty drugs.
What did you
And I
use?
went from, pardon
Yeah,
me?
what did it do? What were your side effects?
Yeah, so I became very stupid. I couldn't remember words. I couldn't remember my train of thought. I felt out of it. I felt like the worst brain fog I had ever experienced. I'd already been through menopause and all of that, so I knew what brain fog was. But when you take these anti-seizure drugs, they're basically barbiturate anticonvulsants. And so they completely dumb you down,
Got it.
and that's how your movements slow down. So anyway, I went on a quest to find some other alternative way to manage my seizure. So I went on, of course, PubMed, which any nurse would do. And I looked up, treatments for seizure disorders, for movement disorders, for Parkinson's disease, for essential tremor. And cannabis kept coming up. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And so I took a very deep dive into cannabis and I learned that it is nothing like we've been told it is. There was a little bit of malice, I will put it gently, in the government's efforts to criminalize cannabis. It is a very safe medicine. It has a lot of different medical effects that we can use. There's only one compound in it that causes the stoned feeling or the intoxication, and that's THC. Most of my patients aren't looking to get high. In fact, they try to avoid that aspect, which is a very easy thing to do. Um, but anyway, so I learned about cannabis, and long story short, I was able to completely discontinue my pharma drugs.
Mhm.
And I've been managing my tremors ever since, which is almost 10 years now, using cannabis. And kind of as a side effect of me starting to use cannabis and my tremors really calming down is my friends and family. It was so obvious. They're like, geez, you seem so much better. What are you doing?
Mm.
And, I told them I was doing cannabis. And of course, they were shocked that me, of all people, would be doing cannabis.
Uh-huh.
But once I kind of told them a little bit about it, they were like, geez, do you think it could help me with my migraines, with my periods, with my autoimmune disease, with, everything under the sun? And that's basically how my practice started. I just started helping friends and family, and they would refer me, when something works,
Yeah.
everybody wants to tell everybody about
Yeah.
it. And my practice basically exploded overnight.
Uh-huh.
And I've been doing it ever since. It's the best nursing job I've ever had. I work independently. You
So let me back you up
actually,
for 1 second because this is all exciting and nurses love this stuff because we're independent thinkers and out of the box thinkers. And if something doesn't work for our patients, I mean, especially as a nurse practitioner, oh, and even as a problem solver, as a nurse, I remember doing things for my patients that made more sense. I couldn't prescribe for them, but I certainly was using commonsensical things that worked in day-to-day living. And it was like not aha moments, but it was like the critical thinking that we learn over years of helping people in a certain way. But I just didn't want to cut you off, but I know we all evolve in our practices and what we've experienced as workers, as NPs. And, sometimes there's these, I'll call it a God wink, where you get thrown into something you didn't even expect because you needed it. And then you find out that I can help everyone. I think it's a cool, cool story. And I remember you saying your sisters and brothers also had the same tremor. So is
yeah,
it
so I'm
really
the
all
youngest of eight.
okay?
And there's six of us that have it.
Yeah,
If you were to
a lot.
rank the severity, my brother Jeff, who is 10 years older than I am, he's had it the worst. As I was mentioning, the common medical approach to this movement disorder is to, as the tremors get worse and worse over time, because we know it's progressive, they just increase the dose of the anti-seizure meds until it becomes toxic. Then they have to discontinue that one and put you on a different anti-seizure med. And so he'd been through all of them.
So there's a
And
tolerance. Did he reach like a tolerance? Is that what sort of happens? Or his
it's
condition
just
got
the
worse?
dosage gets too high.
Right,
That you can only go so high
but how
on
come
a
they had to
dose.
keep going higher? Because he was either not, his tolerance was grown from it, or was his tremors getting worse and he just needed more?
Yeah, the tremors get worse.
Okay.
So I've had tremors now for probably, I don't know, 40 years. I'm 65 now.
Okay.
And it was only in the last, well, it was about 11, 10 years ago that they were so bad that I needed medication.
Mhm.
So, the typical course of essential tremor is it just gets worse and worse over time. So, as it gets worse, they increase the dose of the medicine until the point where it's at too high of a dose. And then they have to put you on a different med and they go through that whole
Of course.
process.
Yeah.
So,
So let's talk about a few things. I know that, you can get lots of stuff in the gas stations. You can,
yes.
you don't know what you're getting. Tell us more about a dispensary or how that works out there, because I don't even know how they are. I've never really been in one. Tell me more about
Yeah. Most people are a little bit intimidated by going into a dispensary for their medicine, which I completely understand.
that.
But probably one of the most important things I could tell people today is that cannabis is a plant that has hundreds of compounds in them. Each one of those, excuse me, each one of those compounds has its own medical effects. So, for example, THC, as I said, it's great anti-nausea, it's great for pain. It is a neuro anti-inflammatory. CBD, which is another compound in the plant, which most people have heard of, that's good for seizure disorders. It's good for mild to moderate pain. It's a muscle relaxant. It's an antidepressant. It's an anxiolytic. It has all of these different properties. And then those are called cannabinoids. There are about 140 cannabinoids in the plant. THC is the only one that causes a psychoactivity. That's the only cannabinoid. If you need it, you have to go to a dispensary to get it.
Got it.
Every other compound in the plant is available over the counter. You can order it online. You can, like when I work with patients, I can ship it across state lines. It's no problem at all because it's classified as hemp.
Okay.
But if it has a certain amount of THC in it, then you have to purchase that in a dispensary. And it is controlled, it's state controlled. Every state has its own laws. So you really need to kind of, educate yourself on what your local laws tell you. So the products that you buy in a dispensary by law in every state, so far anyway, those products need to be lab tested. And the reason why is because we have to make sure there is no pesticides, there are no heavy metals, there are no contaminants, no bacteria, no fungus, because the plant is susceptible to all of those things. So in order to sell in a dispensary, you first need to have it lab tested. All the other over-the-counter products do not have that requirement. So there's a lot of crap out in the market, and a lot of unsuspecting people will go out and buy a product and they'll end up saying, it doesn't work for me. I didn't notice anything. Well, it's probably the product was not good. So there are certain manufacturer, certain brands that I use and that medical people use that are lab tested. And we rely on those lab tests to dose the product, to make sure that it's clean. And so that is probably my biggest public service announcement is do not buy any cannabis products that are over the counter unless they've been lab tested, because one of the characteristics of the cannabis plant is it's considered a bioaccumulator. So they will plant hemp plants, which is basically cannabis with a low level of THC. They'll plant it to clear soil of heavy metals, of pesticides, of other toxins, because the plant will suck it all up into the plant, and then they cut down the plant and dispose of the plant. Well, what if you've got a grower who is growing these plants, they're still going to be bioaccumulating. That's part of the nature of the plant. So when you're in a dispensary, everything is lab tested, it's state controlled, you're safe. If it's over the counter, you can get your hands on some pretty dirty products.
Okay.
And
It's good
for
to
what?
know. So they
Yeah.
should go to a dispensary, first of all, if they're looking, perhaps, right? Do you
Well,
find
they
the homeopathic stores that are not dispensaries that may have like hemp oil or balms, are they considered okay if people just go to those for some of these products? What do you think?
The thing that I would recommend is wherever you buy it, before you buy anything,
Hmm.
just go on the brand's website, because if they are lab tested, it's expensive to do that. And so
Yeah.
they plaster that on the very front page of their website because it is literally a badge of honor.
Uh-huh.
Clinicians who are in this field will never use any products where there's no lab report. And so if you find a brand and it looks good and sounds good and you go on their website and there's no mention of any lab testing, it's also called COA, which means Certificate of Analysis.
Mhm.
If they don't have that, just don't buy the product. Usually there is no cannabinoids in there. And if there are, they aren't clean. And so therefore it's cheaper. The company makes a lot of money on unsuspecting consumers. So that's probably the most important thing that I can mention today is selection of products is the cornerstone of having a good cannabis protocol where you're going to get good effects.
Okay, so a couple more things. I went on Mayo Clinic just because I like Mayo Clinic, and I think there's a large bunch of information that I get from all sorts of medical evidence-based, and I see a lot about medical marijuana and the use. And I know it did talk about spasticity, like MS, spinal cord injuries, seizures, and then, of course, chronic pain from neuropathic pain. I saw that.
Mhm.
Nausea, especially from chemotherapy, going through oncology treatments, palliative care for end of life. That sort of thing. And I saw a lot of science behind that. And one thing I do want to ask, though, and that's another reason why people are worried about the medical marijuana, is they worry about the addiction, or if they have an addictive personality or whatever. Do I go there at 60 because now I have these problems I didn't have when I was 30, but I have an addictive personality? How about that? Anything you can add for that, or?
Absolutely. So, cannabis, if you have a history of drug abuse, if I'm working with somebody who has a history of drug abuse, I will use everything without THC because it can, make them want to, get high again or whatever. So you can avoid all of that by just eliminating the THC from the protocol. In the terms of the hierarchy of addictions, we all know that tobacco is probably the most addictive substance, besides sugar. But
Hmm.
and what they say is about almost 40% of the people who use tobacco become addicted to it. Oh, sorry about that.
Oh,
Um,
and that's for sure. Nicotine. Yeah, that's
yeah.
a strong one, hard to get off, I'm sure.
Right. And right below that, we've got the cocaine. Below that, we have, different substances all the way down to the very bottom, which is coffee. So 9% of the people who ingest coffee become addicted to it. Cannabis has that same percentage. 9% of the people who use cannabis become addicted to it. So, and it's interesting because the withdrawal symptoms of cannabis are almost identical to the withdrawal symptoms of coffee. You're going to be irritable for 2 weeks. You're not going to be sleeping well for 2 weeks. You're not going to feel your best for 2 weeks. But after that, it's over.
Mhm.
So the good news of that is because cannabis, speaking of addictions, because cannabis is such an effective pain reliever, including neuropathic pain, which I use a lot for people with sciatica, with shingles, with trigeminal neuralgia, with MS, with any of the neurodegenerative diseases, there's going to be an element of pain in there, which opioids don't touch. But people get very addicted to opioids. So what we've been able to do is reduce the risk of people who are taking opioids for pain by adding cannabis to it so we can decrease the dose on the opioids while we're increasing the dose on the cannabis.
That's great.
And it's a big deal. I mean, the New England Journal of Medicine did a study in Colorado. This is years ago, like 2 years after they legalized cannabis recreationally. Their overdose deaths decreased by 25%, which is unheard of. To be even able to stop the increase in overdose deaths,
Isn't that amazing?
let alone
Yeah.
let alone reduce it by 25% is mind blowing. And why this isn't, front page news
Yeah.
is beyond me.
Well, I know we have
But
a lot going on with the pharmaceuticals and things in the government now, trying to kind of figure out why we can go to Mexico or other places in the world and get some medication for losing weight or something for 1/16th of the price that it is in America. And it's just it's better, if not good enough, but cheap, cheap, cheap.
yep,
And the same product, if not a better product. Y- That blows my mind. The other thing is
yeah.
traveling with this in your bag. Is there an issue with that before
Oh
I?
yeah. If you're going, well, it depends on where you're traveling to. For instance, it's so funny you mentioned that because I just got back from Egypt a couple of months ago, and while I was there, I ended up with a toothache. So in their health system, you don't need a doctor. You just walk into a pharmacy. So I walked in, I said, I need a Z-Pack. And I got a Z pack for what's equivalent to about $2.50.
Yeah.
And it was like, are you kidding me? First of all, I can go get my own medicine. I don't need somebody to be my gatekeeper. And number two, I pay a fraction of what it was. And sure enough, within 2 days, my toothache was gone. So you're
Interesting.
absolutely right. We are being gouged here. Healthcare is, in my opinion, I mean, this is a whole other subject, but healthcare in this company has been hijacked by big pharma and by the insurance companies, and we're all at a loss because of it. We are all,
I think we're getting smart now, and I think we're trying to navigate that a little better going forward, it seems. Did you notice if there's also help for people with Alzheimer's or dementia with the use of
yeah,
cannabis?
absolutely. In
Oh, that's
fact,
big. How do they get it if they has a husband or a wife with Alzheimer's and memory loss? I mean, where do they get it? Do they get it through a neurologist? Do they know much about it, or do they have to how do they find people like you to help them? Is that the only way they go that direction? Yeah.
usually it is. Most physicians aren't very interested in learning this whole new field of cannabis. Plus, they got the bejesus scared out of them by Janet Reno, who was the Attorney General way back when, and she threatened that any physician who would recommend cannabis would lose their license. And of course, the appellate court stepped in and said, "You can't do that." So, but it scared physicians to the point where they really don't want to have anything to do with it. As certainly as long as it's a Schedule One drug, which the THC component is a Schedule One
It
drug.
is a
But
scary one. I
for
was going to
people
ask
who are
you that.
looking
Hmm.
for help, especially if you have a condition like Alzheimer's or cancer, where you need, consistent monitoring, you should find a cannabis consultant, preferably a nurse. Nurses are so good at this. It
Yeah.
is so up their alley to work with patients and using natural products and monitoring them and adjusting the dose and doing all of the things that we do. It's like it was made for nurses. So there is a nursing organization because the American Nurses Association, about a year ago, classified cannabis nursing as a recognized specialty in nursing. So there is an association, the American Cannabis Nurses Association. You
Okay.
can go there and they have a directory. You can put in your zip code or your location, and they can do that. If anybody wants to call me, I'm happy to help them out. Again, this is the type of situation where telehealth is wonderful. I
Yeah.
can work with people over Zoom and ship them medical grade products. If they do need THC, I can find a dispensary that's close to them, look at the menu of their products and tell them exactly what to buy, because it's a little overwhelming. People walk into a dispensary, there are usually a gazillion products. The
Yeah.
music is blaring.
Yeah.
People are dressed with, the short shorts and the tats, and for people my age and older, it's
Yeah.
almost like, oh God, are you kidding? This is where I have to go to bed and get my
But
medicine.
wait a minute, we were around during Woodstock. We should be able to like just gel right in. I hear you, Susan. How do we, if somebody has a question, how do they reach you? What's your email or address that you want to use?
Yeah, they can email me at Susan at dearnursesusan.com.
Okay, that's
So
good.
let me explain the name.
Yeah,
So when I was first getting started, and after my friends and family were like, "Oh my God, you're doing cannabis," then I got a gazillion questions. And for anybody my age or older, you probably remember Dear Abby.
yeah.
She was the go-to for all your questions. So that's why I said Dear Nurse Susan's, because I was doing blogs and stuff, doing a lot of educating.
That's
So
wonderful.
my email is Susan at dearnursesusan.com.
That's great. And is there a www as well, or not? You don't have
Yeah.
that.
So
What's that?
Yeah, so if they want to go on my website, it's www.dearnursesusan.com.
Okay, so this is your website. And if you want to, can you give a phone number that way, or how do
Yeah,
you
that's
best like to communicate?
it is on my website.
Okay.
I can say it on the podcast to make it
Okay.
easier for everybody. So my area code is 310
Mhm.
701
Okay.
4373.
4373. Okay, everyone, just so you know, I'm going to put all this information on my blurb on this podcast, just so you have the information. And if you don't seem to catch it, just text me on my YouTube channel and I'll get this information for you. I think this is great. I have two or three people right away. I have a friend who says, Nancy, I have a bobblehead. And like when she says a bobblehead, all I can think about is, like the little bobble and the car, the plastic bobblehead. Usually it's a plastic Jesus. But she will bobble while she's talking to me, and I'm like, I have somebody to fix your bobblehead. Not to be
Yeah.
funny, but she called it that. So I'm gonna
Yeah.
give it. And I have a friend who has Parkinson's, and he's just fading away. Um,
Hmm.
and I know we should try something else. And I know they tried smoking,
Hmm.
but he's a little Tibetan man, not very big, and he just would be sleeping all day long. So we got to try to figure out, I should say Trinidadian. Uh-oh, she'll kill me. Trinidadian, different country.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, these are people I think of that I love and are in my life. And I'm like, why don't we just jump over to the other side of the cliff to find out maybe there is something else we could do to make your quality of life better, especially if you've been down the road a while, trying what the pharmaceuticals are doing for you and they're just not cutting it. Um,
Hmm.
so this is good. Is there anything else we should tell everybody?
Well, I think I will send you the link to a couple of YouTube videos that
Okay.
one is a Parkinson's patient who took cannabis for the first time with the help of another Parkinson's patient. And you see in 4 minutes from him having major dyskinesia to being still, which is a huge deal. Anybody who has a movement disorder
Mhm.
understands the value of stillness.
Right.
So I'll send you that. And then I'll also send you the link of another YouTube video of an Alzheimer's patient
Okay.
who was basically non communicative. And then they started her on CBD oil. And the transformation is miraculous. I will send that to you so you can put that in your notes as well. Anybody who's interested in getting a glimpse of the power of cannabis and how it can be a real game changer, like it was for me in my life,
Okay.
and that it's not some scary thing that we've been told that it is. So
Okay.
hopefully that will interest people, and they'll take a look at that.
I think one more thing we should say, because is it nurse practitioners or nurses that could join you or learn the program to nurse practitioners? Or,
Anybody, because the current state of the law is you don't even need to be a healthcare person
oh,
to coach people on how to use cannabis. Every dispensary bud tender who's selling products is telling you how to use it. They're recommending what products to use for different conditions. So legal, it's not even required that you be licensed. I'm trying to get it so that licensed people are doing this work because there are drug interactions to consider. And,
absolutely.
we look at the big picture.
Yeah.
um, so
Yeah.
anyway, I am approved by the California Board of Registered Nursing as a CEU provider. I have programs and courses on my website that people can take a look at, and
Perfect.
they'll get CEUs for that.
Okay.
But
That's good to know. I mean,
yeah,
it could be something that, somebody wants a new career, but they know that this is of the times and they are wanting to work in more of a homeopathic angle instead of a pharma angle with people. Well, this is
exactly.
wonderful, Susan. Dear Susan, dear Abby, dear Susan, dear Susan. Thank you so much for coming. And we really enjoy this lecture that you've given us and all this information that I knew squat about, even as a nurse practitioner. So I really appreciate you for this. So everybody check my YouTube channel, Caregiver Success, and my book that I wrote for caregivers. There's nothing about cannabis in it though, because it came out like a year and a half ago, and it really hasn't really hit the charts yet, but we're getting there. We're getting there. Um,
Maybe on the next
yeah.
edition, you can have a new chapter in it.
Yeah, the next edition. Oh, please. Anyway, check out the channel and I'll send you all of Susan's information. And for those of you out there with movement disorders, let's do something about it that's natural and good and get you off some of your meds. So from Nancy, the NP here, have a great night, everyone. God bless, and we'll see you at the next video. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Take care.
You too. Bye.